Passage 42, Valentine's Day. John and Bella had been dating for 1 month, and Valentine's Day was approaching. To make sure it would be a perfect night, John had made reservations 2 weeks in advance for a fancy Italian restaurant downtown. He knew that in order to impress Bella, he would really have to step things up. On the evening of Valentine's Day, John had his suit hanging up so as to prevent it from wrinkling, and when he put it on, he sighed in relief. It wasn't wrinkled at all. After he was dressed, he got on his computer in order to look up directions to the restaurant. To arrive on time, he would need to leave in approximately 5 minutes. John brushed his teeth so as to make sure his breath would not stink, and then left. Meanwhile, Bella was at her apartment, still getting ready. To ensure her hair would not be frizzy that night, she had washed it the day before. Her hair looked great, but her makeup was another story. She figured that in order to look her best, she would have to pile on makeup. But to do that would not be true to herself, for she rarely wore makeup in the first place. Bella was nervous about the date, so she had a cup of tea and consoled herself with the thought that she did her best. To go on a date on Valentine's Day was a big deal, and she hoped everything would go well. John arrived at Bella's house, and then they drove to the restaurant. He had picked her up a few minutes early so as to be sure they had plenty of time to drive to the restaurant and arrive on time, but it didn't matter. The restaurant was full, despite the fact that John had made a reservation. He could hardly contain his anger. The owner of the restaurant was embarrassed about the accident, so in order to pacify John, he called a friend who owned another restaurant and asked the manager there to set aside a table for John and Bella. John and Bella went to the other restaurant, which was smaller and further away, but much less crowded and, as a result, far more intimate. They ended up having a great time. To everyone else, the restaurant might have seemed dingy and cramped. To them, however, it was a perfect place for a date on Valentine's Day.